What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it. And
what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's your man Wise, and we got to talk about the media having another meltdown again over one of their own. The chief of CBS's 60 Minutes just resigned, and the reason is a lawsuit involving Donald Trump. Now, let's be clear. This wasn't just any resignation. It was strategic, it was quiet, and very convenient. Why? Because the lawsuit alleges that the network buried key stories and manipulated coverage in ways that could have impacted public opinion during the election last year. You know, that Kamala Harris interview that was doctored up. And mainstream media, they're scrambling, not to fix it, but to spin it. Because it's not just about 60 Minutes. It's about the entire ecosystem of the legacy media that's been playing defense for the left while pretending to be objective, while pretending to just report the news. But we know that they are just propaganda arms for the DNC. They're not mad because it happened. They're mad because it's being exposed. And Trump, he's not just suing. He's pulling back the curtain on how the media industrial complex really works. And they're panicking. We got to check out this clip here from Newsnight. My guy, Scott Jennings, doing what he does best. But there is an individual on here. I didn't catch his name. But there's an individual on here who called independent media and people who are not a part of the established legacy media freaks, or that he called it a freak show. We got to talk about it. You guys got to see it for yourself. Like, share, subscribe, turn the notifications on so you never miss an upload. Let's get into it.
Sherry Redstone, Paramount's controlling shareholder, has said that she wants to settle this. She is in limbo as well, waiting on Trump and the administration to approve a multi-billion-dollar sale of the company. Owen says that his former show is falling victim to corporate greed. Quote, "The show is too important to the country. It has to continue. Just not with me as executive producer." Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is Jeff Jarvis. He's a journalism professor and the author of the Gutenberg Parenthesis. Jeff, this is, I guess, maybe an inevitability of what we thought was happening over at CBS, which is that maybe the corporate overlords are putting a lot of pressure on the news organization, wanting to settle this lawsuit so they can eventually get a paycheck at the end of the day.
I've been there. I started the magazine Entertainment Weekly 35 years ago, and when we were merging at Time Inc. with Warner Brothers, pressure was put on me to be nice to Hollywood suddenly. I quit as a result so the magazine could live in a better path. So I respect what Owens has done here. I think it's important. Corporate pressure exists in every job. We all see that. But in this case, there is a bending of the knee to Trump. Now, the problem is, I don't know that him quitting is going to make a bit of difference in what happens next, because Sherry Redstone has shown that she'll bend the knee. I wish that they were more like Harvard and less like Columbia, but I think that the Paramount CBS has shown where they stand right now. And they're going to be bought by Larry Ellison's son, and Ellison is a friend of Trump, so I don't see shiny days ahead.
Things are not getting better. But what do you think is the consequence of him quitting? We've seen a lot of different reactions to Trump pressure. There's Harvard and the lawsuit, but then there's also Columbia and the caving.
I think it's like a senior consultant in a campaign. Everything I know, y'all, everything's a campaign with me, but stay with me here. It's like they're the last person in the room. They're helping guide the ship. They're not the main actor. The campaign, the candidate is the main actor. You're there to try to keep everything running on time and make sure that it's, I guess, ethical or staying in the middle of the road or whatever your thing may be. You have influence over that. If he's gone, who has that influence?
But it's bringing attention to this.
Yeah, I think that the problem is first you had the ABC settlement that was a few months ago, and then if you now have a CBS settlement, he's going after the Associated Press. A judge just ruled in Voice of America's favor today. So you have the media will succeed in somewhat, just like you're reporting earlier. If CBS were allowed this to move forward, it's likely going to be in their favor, but there are entities the institutions that feel like they need to bend the knee to Donald Trump. And this isn't just about the media. It is about law firms. It is about universities. It is about potential nonprofits.
And it's not just about bending the knee, it's also about paying bribes to Trump. The ABC settlement was nothing short of backsheesh.
Yes.
And the CBS settlement would be the same.
And it sets a terrible precedent. I mean, one of the things that Trump has tried to do is he's trying to silence the media. And by having these agreements with ABC and potentially CBS, with law firms, with with potential universities, it's silencing institutions that don't agree with him. And that is where I think the American people should be worried about.
And a First Amendment violation, to be sure.
Absolutely.
Look, I understand Sherry Redstone's position. She's a majority shareholder. She has a fiduciary responsibility to the other shareholders to try to get this deal done. I know if I owned a percent of it, I'd certainly tell her you need to figure this out by any means necessary. As it pertains to the gentleman resigning, I mean, to your point, Jeff, I don't know what significance this will hold. I don't know what percent of Americans still watch 60 Minutes.
Would you? You said figure it out. You said figure it out. Would you advise Sherry Redstone to do what is being alleged here, which is perhaps pressure CBS?
I just know in business, when there's a deal of this magnitude on the table, your shareholders do not want that deal.
Sure, but what does this do to the value of CBS, the former Tiffany network, when people cannot know whether to trust it anymore, when they wonder what stories they'll be, and I know...
No one trusts it right now. What are we talking about? We know that they doctored, or at least most people believe that they doctored the interview with Kamala Harris. People don't trust 60 Minutes right now. People don't trust legacy media right now. What is this dude talking about? He obviously isn't living in the United States of America, or he lives in one of those elite liberal bubbles that has no communication with regular Americans in this country. That would be my assumption.
You laugh, Scott,
I
because
think,
you think nobody's
I think
trusted.
people have lost trust in it for a lot of reasons. It has nothing to do with this deal.
But I think now the problem is that it ruins its brand with that audience who did trust and did care about them, and that affects the value of the company.
No, Jeff, I take that point. I guess I would offer a different position here. If I were to run CBS, my bigger question would be, how do I maintain whatever market share I have? And right now, they got a viewership problem.
Well,
so I'm not really sure.
60 Minutes really have a view. I mean, 60 Minutes is different from overall.
CBS as a whole.
But 60 Minutes in particular is a
This is the bigger question.
magazine.
The bigger question is that mass media are dying. I hate to say this in the middle of mass media.
I mean, we all know
but
that.
Mass media are dying. And so if you try to think that we're going to please everybody, those days are over. You've got to stand on some principle. You've got to stand for something. You've got to be somewhere in the spectrum. And if you think you're just going to make nice to everybody, the problem is that the right wing, hello Scott, has taken advantage of this situation, I think, quite cleverly, quite wisely. They've played into a weakness.
What situation?
The situation of media being under attack. And so
Media is under attack because the people know that legacy media has been lying. Mainstream media is under attack. I wouldn't even say it's under attack. No one's watching it anymore because they know that it's a propaganda arm for the Democrat Party. And people have decided to cut the cord and go in a different direction. Simple as that. Let me let Scott Jennings cook.
they've created a situation where...
You've almost got it. Keep going. What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it and stop putting your finger on the scale, especially during
you're talking about the old mass media myth that you could have this thing that was in the middle. The Walter Cronkite saying, that's the way it is, when it wasn't for many Americans the way it was. When people were pissed off.
People back in those days trusted the media, did they not?
No, they just couldn't be heard. Because there was no two-way. Now we have the internet.
Look at the Gallup polling. It was here, and now it's here. It's fallen off of a cliff.
Yeah, we do have that Gallup polling about
terrible.
trust in media, and now, as in recent years, and let's be honest, Scott, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the aisle. I mean, it's not.
You think it's driven by the rhetoric and not the performance?
Absolutely. Okay. On the question of what is what is Trump's interest in this? That's one of the questions. Is it to have media that is in the middle, that is fair? Here is just a sampling of what has been happening at the White House as Trump has, he's entitled to do this, but invited very sycophantic media into the White House. Listen.
Why don't you wear a suit? And you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you do own a suit?
Right. Will you guys also consider releasing the president's fitness plan? He actually looks healthier than ever before. Healthier than he did 8 years ago, and I'm sure everybody in this room could agree. Is he working out with Bobby Kennedy? And is he eating lots of McDonald's?
Photos have emerged of Senator Van Hollen sipping what appears to be margaritas with Abrego Garcia down in El Salvador. Do you encourage other Democrats to fly down to El Salvador to meet with this illegal alien who's an accused wife beater?
I like this guy. See, now this is the kind of a reporter we like.
Trump is not.
They're upset because they have opened it up to people who have independent platforms who are going to ask questions that are not going to beat the daggone president up or Republicans in general. We see it all the time. Every time we see a Democrat congressperson, senator, congresswoman, or congressman sit down with a liberal, it is a soft interview. It's almost like they're having a real conversation amongst friends. When you see a Republican, whether it's a congresswoman, congressman, or senator, sit down with these people, it is a full-fledged fight. Every time you see it, it's a full-fledged debate and it's a fight. They're not there to interview, to ask questions. They're there to debate, to push their agenda and to get their point across and to make the people on that side of things look bad. We see it all the time.
Interested in middle of the road Walter Cronkite reporting, and I think it's also completely ahistorical to describe Walter Cronkite as somebody who did not have a point of view, as he very famously did. But Trump is not interested in that, Scott. He's not.
Of course he's not. No, look, no politician, no president, Democrat or Republican, wants to be pilloried every day, and all of them believe they're being treated unfairly, and they all want to be treated better than they think they're being treated.
So is this about trust in media, or is it about bringing in more media that is favorable to him? I think that's the question.
But my point is this. If you're CBS or any other news outlet, the reason that you have lost trust ought to be obvious to you, and the way to fix it also ought to be obvious to you, and it has nothing to do with Donald Trump and everything to do with the product. Just try to make a better product that appeals to more people. And the way you appeal to more people is by not crapping on half or more than half of the country because of their values and political viewpoints.
I think that is a fair, just if we were sort of on another planet, out of context, it is a fair description of what is necessary in this moment. But I think in the context of this particular moment, where the pressure is coming from up high, the question is, what does the administration want? What will be the price that Sherry Redstone has to pay in order to get a yes on their deal?
There's no price you can pay. Look at what happened with Columbia. Look what happened to law firms. Look what happened with the AP. If you bend the knee, you get kneecapped. And I think to the point of the Associated Press, what should have happened is the rest of the press should have walked out. I was at an event at Columbia yesterday where the dean of the journalism school there asked that question of A.G. Salzberger of the New York Times, and there was resistance to that idea. But as Jelani Cobb, the dean at Columbia, said, what you'd end up with in that press room then is, and these are my words, the freak show that Trump wants. Trump tries to devalue media. Why should we value his freak show there? Leave it to the freaks.
I think there's one more thing that we're not talking about. We're walking into White House Correspondent Dinner weekend, and I'm seeing corporate sponsors and other folks who want to give money to good things, like giving scholarships to journalism students, an event that I host, where corporations want nothing to do with it because it's hosted by a brown guy, because they're like, we're not doing DE&I this year because we don't want to be punished.
I'll just say quickly here, if you look at the media landscape now, it is more democratized where people are getting and sourcing their information from. It does come from a lot of these non-traditional places. So if you're the White House and you want to communicate with at least a third of the country, and maybe they're watching Joe Rogan or someone else, I would argue it makes sense to have individuals representative from these spaces there.
But they're not freaks. I think calling them freaks.
I don't think there's any disagreement on that, by the way.
I mean, he called these new media sources the freak show. They're not freaks. They have audiences.
Some of them are.
They have audiences, and there's a reason that they're thriving is because people are starved for information that they think they can trust. They're not freaks. They're filling a need in this country, in my opinion.
All right, and I assume you all...
Scott Jennings is absolutely right there. And that's the problem with these liberal elites like this dude. That is the problem. Anybody that steps out of their norm, what they deem acceptable, they get name called and they get called freaks. And Scott's absolutely right. There is not a politician out there that doesn't want some favorable questions from time to time. There isn't a politician out there. And the last time I checked, over the past 4 years, everybody bent the knee to Biden. Everybody bent, because you wasn't allowed to ask a follow-up question. He wouldn't take hardly any interviews. The man was on vacation half the daggone time that he was in office. And when he did take an interview, you had a strict amount of questions, no follow-ups, no probing questions, no additional questions off the cuff or off the top that you just, came off the top of your head out of the blue. None of that. That right there is what I would consider kneecapping or handcuffing the media. But again, these people aren't interested in fair. They've had the scales tipped on their side for so long that when the scale gets tipped close to being even, they cry that it's unfair. I mean, it's ridiculous to me. But I want to hear from you guys in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe, turn the notifications on so you never miss an upload. Consider joining the ARP family, or you can buy your man a coffee. Link in the description box below. Appreciate the support, the love. Keep God first. Stay prayed up. We'll catch up with you all next time. Peace.
Vibes so